Hey guys, how y'all doing? Bioniclesaurus here, and in this video we're going to be taking a look at this. This is the 2018 Safari Ltd. Hyaenodon. Now, Hyaenodon is certainly one of my favorite prehistoric mammals, and I don't think I'm an overly unique individual for holding that opinion. Hyaenodon seems to be fairly popular as far as extinct Cenozoic animals go, and Safari has done an absolutely outstanding job recreating it in toy form. So without further ado, let's go take a closer look. The first thing I want to talk about is fur, because fur pretty much makes or breaks a mammal figure, as you can, I'm sure, imagine. Any toy or model of a mammal, extinct or extant, large or small, the fur texture and sculpting is just incredibly important. And when it comes to this Hyaenodon gigas, the fur texture truly delivers. The sculpting is gorgeous. I especially love this little tuft of fur sticking up here. Adds a lot of sort of motion and life to what is otherwise an inanimate, static thing. That's so nice. You can just imagine the fur kind of rustling and moving around as the muscles underneath the skin contort and stretch and pull as the animal moves its massive body forward. Actually adds quite a lot to the realism and the overall sort of naturalistic feel of the figure. Just look at that. How fantastic does that look? This is reminding me a lot of the Mastodon in terms of just how crisp and nice looking the fur is. Just, my goodness, you know, you don't think about detail quite as much with fur. With scales, it's really easy to immediately sort of pick up on whether or not they're crisp and well sculpted. Fur, I just don't think is talked about as much, but it's such a vital part of any mammal model. And my goodness, just look at that. Look how well it's sculpted. It looks so shaggy and natural and real. Looks like it's a real organic sort of soft substance in motion as the animal moves. They just fantastically captured that. In terms of the head sculpt, while we're looking at this in a close-up, my gosh, that just looks ferocious. It's well detailed, well painted. The muzzle has a lot of nice details with little veins and things running through. Really nice kind of fleshy feel. You can tell that the nose would be wet like a dog's. There's a kind of a subtle gloss to the entire muzzle that's really, really nice. Gives it that just nice sort of shine in the light. Now you can see mine has a little bit of a paint scuff on the nose, but that's a pretty easy fix. Here's a little hack. If you ever have paint scuffs on something that's entirely black, a Sharpie is all you need to take care of that. So that's what I plan on doing right after I film this. I just wanted to make sure that you guys didn't see like an altered version of the product. Looking at the teeth, I will say that the paint application on the teeth is a little bit sloppy in some areas, specifically on the lower jaw. You can see a little bit of white flowing onto the gums. It's really not that big of a deal. It's not terribly distracting in the least, and overall, the sculpting more than makes up for that, and on this side, it's basically perfect. Overall, its head sculpt just looks beautiful. I love the ears. I love how this one is like folding over. Maybe it's doing that itself with internal musculature, or maybe it's the wind blowing on the ear, sort of folding it over. Like occasionally you see a cute little dog walking around with an ear all inside out and goofy. You know, it's just, again, there's a lot of organic kind of motion and lifelike-ness sort of brought into this figure. It doesn't feel static, it doesn't feel inanimate. I think that might be like my #1 compliment to this thing, is just how real it feels. There's so much motion, so much life captured in the way that it has been created. As long as we're talking about, you know, like sort of the capturing of motion in what is in reality something that is inanimate and static, let's talk about the pose, because a pose is pretty much how you capture the majority of motion on your figure that isn't actually moving. It's incredibly important for that particular sort of artistic quality. Now, when it comes to the pose on this figure, I really like it. It's nothing overly striking at first, but the more you look at it, the more you realize that a lot of care went into it. All of the limbs are just perfectly placed. It looks very naturalistic, like it's really moving in a way that it would. All of the musculature is perfectly sculpted in relation to how the limbs are stretched or pulled and where they're standing and how he's supporting his weight. It really reminds me, too, of a lot of modern mammal predators and carnivores. There's a lot of personality and sort of behavioral elements captured here, with the way the head is low slung, the way he's sort of stalking on the ground with the hair spiking up on his back and shoulders. very much like my cat when he sees a big scary dog, actually. But that's fantastic. You get this feeling of a familiar modern mammal behavior just from looking at the pose. That is really well done. Another thing I want to talk about on this figure, something I really like, is the color scheme. Now, when it comes to the quality of the paint application, again, with the exception of a tiny bit of imperfection on the teeth, the paint application is otherwise just about perfect. Very, very fantastic, as usual. And I really like the color choices. Well, I guess more so the patterns, these nice stripes, the fact that there's black sort of covering all of the extremities, almost like his nose, tail, and feet all got like dipped in black paint. Very unique, fantastic look. And the reason I like the paint job so much is not because it's overly crazy looking. It's not like he's just a rainbow Hyaenodon coming at you or anything. But it's so easy to make mammal figures boring. How many mammal figures have you seen where you thought to yourself, dang, that's pretty boring looking? It's because they're all like friggin' gray and brown and that's it. Now granted, this guy is mostly brown, but he has these really well-placed, calculated accents of black, a little bit of a lighter underside, just a lot of nice subtlety, a lot of nice little things that really make all the difference. Now, I'm glad that they still went fairly conservative because, let's face it, mammals, by and large, with a couple of exceptions, are generally less colorful than, say, reptiles or birds and amphibians and such. And so it's good that they went for something that still feels very naturalistic and believable, and that certainly adds to the realistic feel of the figure, but they still just gave it just enough of a unique aspect and enough sort of visual interest to really make it pop and stand out on your shelf. Okay, minor thing. Paw prints. How awesome is that? I was not expecting that. I don't know if that's maybe a more standard thing on mammalian predator figures than I realized, but I don't have a lot of mammals in my collection, and when I noticed that this thing has proper little fleshy pads on the bottoms of its paws, I was just smiling ecstatically. I just find this to be just the nicest little detail to include, something that I certainly would have overlooked. That's so great. Such a minor thing, but it, again, just adds another layer of sort of depth and nuance to this figure. Just, again, shows how much time and thought really goes into making something like this. Alright, let's do size comparisons. Alright, so, first off, I want to bring in our usual, the Safari U Tyrannus. It's a very average-sized figure, and a lot of people probably have it, so it's definitely a good standby size comparison. But I also want to bring in the Macrauchenia and the American Mastodon, just so we can have all of the 2018 mammals that I have currently, thus far, all together here. As you can see, the Hyaenodon is about average size. It's a little on the big side. It's a bit more large and impressive than I actually expected it to be. It's quite heavy. In general, I mean, it's nowhere near the size of the Mastodon, but it's nice the size that it ended up being. A lot of detail was able to get packed into it, and it really has an impressive stance to it. I do believe if it was to be to scale to a lot of the dinosaur figures and stuff, it would have to be a bit smaller, but next to most of the other mammals, I think it works really, really well. And while we're at it, I'm just going to randomly bring in here something I pulled off the shelf, the Safari Archaeopteryx, because this is a beautiful figure. Just look at that iridescence. I've never actually gotten around to reviewing it, so I thought I'd just show it off a little bit. And hey, if you guys want to see a review of this after I do the Ankylosaurus next, then I would be happy to do it. So say down below if you'd be interested in that. But for now, we gotta give this thing an overall rating. So, my final rating for the 2018 Safari Hyaenodon is a 9.5 out of 10. Obviously, there's a tiny bit of imperfection with the paint job around the teeth, and imperfection is literally the harshest word I can really use to describe it. Otherwise, this figure is gloriously, fantastically fantastic and glorious. I'm really impressed with it. I knew I was gonna like it. I'm a large fan of Hyaenodon as a rather unique and terrifying ancient mammalian predator, and I knew this figure was going to do the animal justice, but I just didn't realize how truly well-made and impressive it was really going to turn out to be. This one is highly recommended, and if you'd like to pick this up or any of Safari Ltd's products, you can of course do so as always at safariltd.com or at amazon.com/Safari Ltd. And in case you haven't already, you can use the coupon code BIONIC. It'll be somewhere on the screen at safariltd.com specifically to get 10% off of anything you buy there. For now, thank you for watching, and Bioniclesaurus signing out.